I'm Isla Bergmann, the Director of Architecture for our visitors. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to introduce Kai-Uwe Bergmann as our lecturer for this evening and welcome him to CCA. I also want to thank the Graduate Lecture Series because this is a co-sponsored lecture with them this evening. Kai-Uwe is a partner of Bjarke Ingels Group, or the firm commonly known as BIG, based in Copenhagen. And BIG positions itself as producing an architecture that emerges out of an analysis of how contemporary life evolves in response to multicultural exchange, global economic flows, and communication technologies, which all require new forms of urban and architectural organization. Projects such as the Air Plus Port proposal for Greenland that they did for the Danish pavilion of the 2012 Venice Biennale make this point by resituating the social and economic problems of the project within a larger context that links up global urbanization with transcontinental connectivity and environmental change. In this particular case, for example, the new role that Greenland might play when the logistics of things like geographies and intercontinental transportation are reconfigured as a result of global warming. In a very short span of time, BIG has become extremely successful as a practice, known for its innovative and experimental approach to both the conceptual and formal spatial aspects of architecture, while simultaneously addressing social, economic, and environmental issues in both a practical and a playful way. They've been coined as the oeuvre of the pragmatic utopia. And I'm staring at a screen that says hedonistic sustainability, so you get the point. The firm is known for a number of projects, including earlier work such as the 3 major housing complexes, the mountain dwellings and VM and 8H houses in Ørstad, Copenhagen, and the Copenhagen Island Bath harbor projects, both of which, or all of which we visited this past summer as part of the Water Cities travel program, as well as many recent proposals for Asia, the Middle East, and the United States, where the firm has now opened its new offices as well. Kai-Uwe Bergmann heads up BIG's business development, which has the firm working now in more than 10 different countries. He was the project manager leading Central Asia's first carbon-neutral master plan project for Zira Island, and has been involved in many of the firm's projects, including the Alpenweiss project for Hamburg, Nordhavnen master plan, as well as a number of other competitions and exhibitions, including the Yes is More big solo exhibition at the Danish Architectural Center in 2009. Before joining BIG in 2006, Kai-Uwe was a project architect for the Austrian office of Baumschlager and Eberle, where he was involved in their work on the United Nations AIDS Research Administration building in Geneva, among many other projects. He also served on a number of juries, including the International Holcim Awards in Zurich, and the Architectural Awards in Luxembourg and Bucharest. He received his Master of Architecture at UCLA and his undergraduate architectural degree from the University of Virginia. Please join me in welcoming Kai-Uwe Bergmann.
Thank you very, very much. Actually, we'll start with the light on because I almost feel like this is a This Is Your Life evening. I have actually members from different parts of my life sitting right here in the audience, from Jeff from my master's program, who's now with Surface Design, Todd, who was working at BIG in Copenhagen and is now working here at Methuen in San Francisco, and Mark McDonald, who I worked with at Chihuly's for a number of years. So it's like I'm afraid of what's going to happen as this evening progresses, because I fear that I'm going to be the one sitting there and hearing what's up. But I'd like to thank you very, very much for the invitation. My first experience with CCAC, so you can tell how old I am, was actually in New Orleans for an AIAS convention. And CCAC at that time kicked some real butt. There was like a design competition as part of the conference for the AIAS. and the CCAC folks really overwhelmed everyone in the room, all the other schools. And so it was very intriguing. I, at that point, decided that I would actually seek my master's in California. I just aimed a little lower, didn't get quite as high as San Francisco, but ended up in Los Angeles for a couple of years. Maybe the lights go down on me, and we'll start the conversation. What I'd like to actually do, because you're sort of in the middle of your studies, is to actually start just talking about what architects do and perhaps what they can do, and how we should broaden the ideas or the definition of what designers do. I'd like to start that conversation off with just this sort of statement of hedonistic sustainability. What exactly do we mean by that? It's in many ways, you know, the ideas that sustainability is about something that you have to sort of give up. You have to give up hot showers, or you have to sort of fly less and reduce your carbon footprint, make smaller windows, increase the insulation in walls. So it's always about sort of giving something up for the idea of reducing the demands. We actually feel that you can actually increase the quality of life and increase, therefore, the joy of actually living, but just being much more attentive to how we actually utilize our resources. So that when you actually, let's say, go to the supermarket to buy frozen chicken, that frozen chicken actually required a lot of heat, because in the process of refrigeration, heat is produced. When you're walking beside a supermarket these days, what you end up doing often is actually getting a lot of hot air blown into your face, because there's so much heat produced in a supermarket that they actually just blow it out into the alleyway. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense, that you've actually used so much resource, so much money to actually create this energy and then not to use it, or just to use it once. So what we're looking for are ways that we can actually put our cities together and our buildings together so that the waste energy of one function actually is the giving energy of another. So we create energy loops, and that we would like to actually create energy and then utilize that energy once, twice, 3 times, or even more until it actually is sort of exhausted. So this is kind of an idea of how we can actually structure our cities and buildings so that, say, the server room, which again produces a lot of heat and requires a lot of cooling, could actually be pumped into another portion of the building that actually needs heat, like, let's say, a bathroom floor. So you can actually go into a bathroom and enjoy the fact of having a hot bathroom floor and not actually feel bad about it. So this is a kind of a seminal moment in Copenhagen, where our office is also located. This is in 2009 at the climate conference, and you have basically a room filled of very sort of frustrated people. And it was a moment when we realized that the institution of the UN and also sort of the institution of nationalities could not actually solve the issue of how to deal with our resources. And here you have basically Barroso, Merkel, Gordon Brown at that time, also Sarkozy and Obama, basically realizing at this very moment that there would be no breakthrough, there would be no agreement, and we would basically be sorry for the next generation of how we couldn't actually perform. But actually, it's not about that it didn't perform on the sort of nationalistic level. What that means is that just the responsibility pops down to the regional level, the mayoral level. Us, individuals, can actually now address the issues of resource management. And that's something that I think that architects have the ability to actually make a very good contribution to. So we, as architects, Bjarke here on the your right, is actually taking part in the EU, in the parliamentary sessions, to talk about how we plan on the architectural field and the building field, because we use so much energy to construct and to maintain our buildings, can actually start to think about how these resources are met. Including Bjarke here coming out of 10 Downing Street, again, sort of on a very sort of political level, being active and speaking to politicians about how our urban spaces are being used. This is just after the London riots that occurred a little over a year ago. So Bjarke Ingels Group, or BIG, in a way wants to engage and broaden that definition, and to also engage the political process, because so much of the building industry happens on a policy level. So you actually have to address the policies that then are the undercurrent of actually what the designs are then based on. This woman has probably one of the unsexiest jobs on the planet. She's the director of a waste-to-energy plant. And she basically takes all of our waste that we produce, and then in Copenhagen, because there's no place to actually put it under a landfill or put it under the earth, actually has to deal with it. So they burn it, and they've been burning waste for about 60 years. They're one of the world's leading or most efficient countries about burning this. Now, what's interesting in her statement right here is the last sentence where she says, there's a new waste-to-energy plant that we need because the facility is now over 40 years old in Copenhagen, and we are going to see this facility as architecture that should be a gift to the city. Now, waste-to-energy plants, or energy plants, architecture, gift, city, these are like some strange things to sort of combine into a single sentence. So really what she's saying is that it's an urban issue. She's saying that this should be actually something that gives back and doesn't just take from the city. And so just that as a sort of mission or a tender is a really wonderful thing to have. This is generally what energy plants or these waste-to-energy plants look like. They're just boxes with smokestacks. And you know, they're basically designed by engineers for their efficiency. And as such, they actually are working. But now imagine setting this in the middle of a city and how that then actually relates to all of the things around it. And so Denmark has about 16 of these spread around the country, and about 54% of all waste is burned and put into electricity. 42% is recycled, and 4% goes into the landfill. If I look at the US, 99% of all waste goes into landfill. So there's an untapped potential of actual energy. Now, one of the funniest phone calls that I received after we actually won this competition was from the person who congratulated me was from the Pentagon. And it was a gentleman. He's got a little bit of a Texas drawl. He goes, you really mean you can make energy out of waste? We got a lot of waste. And we like energy independence. So he was actually trying to figure out how to make portable waste-to-energy plants that would follow the military on their foreign exercises, so that they wouldn't actually have to then put their soldiers at risk trying to cart out the rubbish out of the bases that were located mostly in the Middle East. So it's very strange how suddenly something as sort of mundane as trash burning actually becomes a sort of national security item. But the reason that she actually wanted this facility to be something that was very special is that this is the site. This is Copenhagen downtown, and that's where the Queen lives. So the Queen's bedroom looks out onto this site. So it really had to look good. Now, the facility, when we first were asked to sort of participate in this competition, it was going to basically be the largest volumetric building in all of Denmark, truly the biggest. It also has a height of about 100 meters, which is the height of the tallest towers in Copenhagen. So we looked at that, and we then also kind of realized that Danes currently, because it's a flat country, it has the weather of Scandinavia and of skiing and all of that, but doesn't have the topography. So Danes currently drive 8 hours to the north of Sweden to go skiing for a day, and then they drive 8 hours back. Now that doesn't sound very sort of very sustainable. So we actually had the idea, this is one of those slopes. It's about 120 meters from top to bottom, and our building is 100 meters. So we basically wanted to just graft the ski slope from Sweden onto our building. So we have mountains of trash, and we love mountains of snow. So it was just the idea of actually combining the two. And here's the facility. this is what we wanted to create. We want green slopes, blue slopes, black diamond slopes. You take the elevator up to the top, you have a panoramic restaurant, and then you basically create this amenity for the city and for the Danes who enjoy skiing. We won the competition. This is about a year ago. And we won it because it was not only a facility to burn trash, but it also was something that actually could fit into the city, because as you can see, the city is pretty close and is growing closer. So all of these areas are going to become actually residential. And it actually fulfilled that brief that, that Ulla Rutger, the director, actually had proposed. So, as I said, Denmark has the climate to actually ski in the winter. So 3 to 4 months out of the year, you could ski there on natural snow. But we actually envisioned it as a year-round skiing facility to go bikini boarding in the summer. So we're actually thinking of it as kind of like a synthetic snow that's like recycled pop bottles. So this is a, can you believe this is a trash heap in the south of France where they've actually used a synthetic snow material, and this is where Olympic ski teams go to practice in the summertime. So they've got moguls, half pipes, everything, and you can go skiing there all year round. So this is basically the technology that we're hoping to place on top of the plant. Then we thought also about that the plant also has the ability to actually educate. The only way that the human actually changes habit is through information. The more information that we have, the more ability we have to actually distinguish between things and then choose a path that we'd like. So when you look at a normal waste energy plant, you have smoke just trailing out of the top, and you really have no idea the quantity of that smoke or what it's doing to the environment. Now, we felt that if we could quantify smoke and quantify what's coming out of the facility, then you could basically sit there, and every smoke ring that comes puffed out of the smokestack is a ton of carbon. So you're basically sitting there with your girlfriend and looking, and look, dear, 3 tons of carbon have just blown out of the smokestack. So we're basically collecting the water vapor until it has reached sort of 1 ton of carbon, and then through hydraulics, we release it sort of from the smokestack and then release it out as that smoke ring. So, and this is something that we worked on with Realities United. They are sort of an architectural, artistic duo out of Berlin. So in the future, you could come, ski down, and have sort of, smoke ring tales from one city or one facility to another. We just got passed through the Copenhagen political system. All political parties had to agree on this. There are also 4 municipalities that share in the electricity, so all of those mayors had to agree, and that was just signed about a month ago. So it's now actually something that's very much becoming a reality in Copenhagen. So this is also, if you're biking through town, what you can be seeing in I think 2017 is probably the closest. So again, architects, energy, plants, it just does, we want to basically be in that discussion with people. That brings me to a research project that we did with Audi. And Audi, the car company, came to us in Copenhagen, City of Bikes, and said, please help us with the future. And we were really, really sort of confused. We were like, you guys are selling more cars than you've ever before in your history, and you're coming to the city where there's almost 50% people on bicycles, and could you please tell us why? And they said, well, what's really interesting is that we feel secure now, but we have no idea where Audi will be in 2050. And the reason is that all you architects are showing kind of visions of the future, and there are no cars anywhere to be seen. It's like all happy people on bicycles and taking like public transportation. So that's why we're coming to you, the source, to find out how can we get more cars into your renderings. We took that challenge on, and we said, okay, let's look at it on the flip side. And Audi, the four rings, actually are designated for 4 different car companies that all bonded together in the in the early period in the 20s and 30s to become Audi as we know it today. And Audi really distinguishes itself from its competitors by saying that it's very, very sort of technically driven, technically advanced. Now, we asked them, yeah, but what are you? And they said, we're a car company. And we're like, that's exactly what you're not. You are a mobility company, and you move people from one place to another. Imagine if you are Audi bikes, or what about Audi trains, or Audi blades? So think about how you can create the Audi experience and just transfer that to any type of mobility that's out there, so that you're actually talking about the experience of mobility no matter what happens in the future, but that you're actually thinking of moving people in a sort of pleasant way or in that Audi way. So it's like when you're on your blades and you have to shut something and you get that sound of the Audi door shutting or something. But we also said, could you consider actually through technology and the advancements of technology, the driverless car? And they were like, please tell us more. They were pretty intrigued. To tell us more about all of this. So we're like, well, you know, this is basically the reason that we have such difficulties with cars is no matter how much infrastructure we provide you for the car, it is just always sucking it all up and wanting more. So we were like, we need to figure out or find out how we can actually make some improvements in the infrastructure that require less of this sort of infrastructure investment. So if you look at the driverless car, this is basically the idea that you don't drive the car, a computer drives it for you. If you go back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there have been sort of advancements, mostly at the university level, where they've basically allowed for cars to kind of take over the driving. Back in '95, there was NavLab, which drove 5,000 kilometers across the US for most of the time. A year later, 8 cars were then put together and driven also automatically across the US. Now what you'll notice is the difference between this distance, between these 2 drivers and these drivers. Now let's say that this is me. Now the only reason that I have this distance between these 2 cars is the irrationality of that driver. Not me, this driver. So it's basically that there's an irrational equation in the sort of bringing and using this infrastructure. So we are literally destined to have a lot of waste of space, which we could actually make much more efficient if we knew where the cars were going and the cars knew where they were going that were beside it. So what we're suggesting is to really look at the advancements of these driverless cars, and I'm sure that you know of the Google car, which also has driven. We completely are okay with, you know, driverless subways where you have no idea who's driving the subway. It's on a track and it gets on time 98, 99% of the time, and you're just happy. We've been, you know, flying across country on cruise control for decades. Even Tom Cruise has cruise control. So we can see sort of in the development of cars that you basically have anti-lock brakes, self-parking systems. So basically more and more of the car is becoming a cyborg and actually doing things by itself. So we're actually letting go of control. So we're just sort of taking that one step further. Now if you were to look at this sort of architectural manifestation of movement, then here you have Barcelona, which is basically a city that was designed by the foot. Same city, Barcelona, now designed by the horse and carriage. So you suddenly have grids, you have blocks, and you have sort of longer street edges. Then comes the sort of advancement of public transportation and metros and subways. And this is Moscow, where you built garden cities and you housed a lot of people in very dense sort of structures, but then you had points of coming out and dispersing and providing public transport for the people. This is Los Angeles, just a few hours south of here. And this is the intersection of the 405 and the 10. If we take this actually and now zoom out and place it next to Copenhagen downtown medieval core, it is amazing to see how much room is taken up in our cities to just move people in the 4 directions of the compass. So just to sort of move people from east-west to north-south requires that much space. And when you're traveling at sort of high speeds, this is the sort of movement and the distance that you need to actually change a lane or to sort of move in a different direction. So, and this is basically the cities of today are being designed in a way by the Department of Transportation, because they are telling us how to move through the city and how to sort of move through that city more quickly. We're just asking, what if we were to actually consider what a new paradigm could be? Because if we think of, it was possible to move through London at 16 kilometers an hour in 1900. And if you actually were to try to go across town in London today, you're going at 16 kilometers an hour. So after 110 years of development, we have not managed to actually move through a city any faster than it was 110 years ago. So what we're asking is, if this group of people is the same, and this is the space that's required if everyone were biking, if everyone were in a car, and if everyone was in a bus, and we were looking at sort of the space that's required by these different modes of transportation to Audi, then could we consider actually allowing ourselves to sort of give up that ability to sort of control and allow ourselves to be driven by sort of putting in the address and just sitting back and letting the car take us there, so that you suddenly can replace almost 4 cars and that sort of irrationality with 10 cars. That means that today's cities, where 15% is actually taken up by the asphalt and movement, could actually be reduced to 5%. Now, these 10% that are left over, 2 things can happen. We're all going to grow. Cities are, population is, so there's room to grow in the actual transportation system. Or we could actually figure out a financing scheme and allow for development of these 10% so that you could actually create this new kind of paradigm and the investment that it would actually require. So Audi's been really good in that they've actually allowed us to sort of take this idea a little bit further. And we said that instead of coming to an intersection and having all of these rules, what if you were to just come up to an intersection and, like swarms of fish or schools of fish, you would place in the address, and then the car would start to drive, and depending on all the other information that's put into the other cars, would start to sort of align itself and move through the city like a swarm of fish. Now, cities like New York, in a way, already demonstrate or show how this would work. If you imagine that you don't drive a taxi, you tell the taxi where you want to go, you sit back, you relax, and you allow yourself to be driven to that point. So in a way, New York already kind of symbolizes how sitting back and letting someone else sort of take over the driving can actually work. Now, so Audi allowed us to actually work out what we call is a smart grid. This is an LED surface that actually can pick up where all the people are, any kind of information dynamically, and then the car is driving and reacts to the amount of information that's coming in. So as you walk closer to the car's path, the car veers away, so or stops if you cross it. So it's basically to see how we can actually create dynamic streets that can also flow either into the city in the morning or out of the city in the afternoon, so we can actually take care of more people in less space. So the next thing that we're hoping to do right now is to take a block of New York City and actually allow for this LED path to be sort of paving a block of New York City, and of course have a lot of new Audi cars driving on top of it. But It's basically how, again, as architects working with a car company, we're actually talking about transportation and moving people from one place to another, and in a way influencing a lot of space and in a way buildings in that way. So this is our office door into Copenhagen. This is the love that folks have for working there. We have offices in Copenhagen. We just moved into this space just a couple of weeks ago. It reminds me a lot of the space that you're in here at school. It's a beautiful, beautiful space. And in New York, where we are in an old warehouse building right along the Hudson River. We work a lot with models because we kind of work through a lot of iterations or a lot of ideas, and this kind of prototyping allows us to go through a lot of those ideas. That's Bjarke on the right, actually looking at the expo in China that we finished a couple of years ago. And I wanted to sort of talk a little bit about some of the housing projects that we've done. Some of you may know them through publications, but I'd like to sort of give you a little bit more background information. So these are two separate projects. The one on the left is called the VM houses, because they're in the shapes of V and an M, and the project on the right is called the Mountain. The VM is from 2005, and the Mountain is from 2008. You'll notice that it's kind of in a very sort of new district that is connected to the city by a metro. The metro is driverless, runs 24 hours, 7 days a week, every 6 minutes. So you literally have no time schedule, you just walk up, and if you just missed one, you wait, and then the next one comes in at about 6 minutes. So the VM houses are 250 units where the city master plan asked us to kind of build two kind of rectangular buildings. And we said, okay, we can do that, but it's kind of sad because you would be looking from one bedroom straight into the other bedroom. So we asked the city if it was okay to actually take those rectangles and just sort of bend them. So then the bedrooms here are actually looking past, and the bedrooms here are actually looking past the same way here. So you're basically creating density, but at the same time, you're keeping intimacy. And so I think that most people fear when they go into a more dense environment that they're having to give up that level of intimacy, that they're living very tightly together. So in a way, what we're trying to do is to try to sort of find ways to keep people that level of both security and intimacy and privacy that they seek. The other project here is the Mountain Project. And this is where we oftentimes kind of work with the city, and we kind of create arguments or create kind of conversations with the city to find out how we can actually work within the realm of the master plan, but then also push it a little bit. So the city said, we'd like to have a 4-story parking garage and this 10-story housing project. To which we said, that's great, but it's a little sad if the first 4 levels of the housing look directly into a parking garage. So we said, what if you viewed the parking as actually a foundation, and you actually place the housing on top, so that you then cut away, so we basically are cutting away from the actual developable envelope from the client. Thankfully, it's the same client, because we wanted to preserve these views that we had just created. So he was okay with that. And then we place 80 units, all typical units, almost all the same, on top of the parking garage, where then the roof of your neighbor is your outdoor terrace. And the beauty of this is that you're living 11 stories up, and you have a 600 square foot terrace to actually go out and enjoy your tea or cup of coffee. This is this district, entirely new, being built to the south of Copenhagen. Now, in a previous generation, the dream in Copenhagen was this. This was to live in a sort of single-family detached house with a yard. And that was like the 60s and 70s dream of moving out of the downtown and having that. But in Copenhagen, you can't actually persist or keep going because there isn't enough land. So what they decided to do was to preserve this green space entirely into perpetuity, and then to develop this space. And what they did was they built this metro first. So they built a metro to nowhere. That's hard to believe. So in 2002, these stops and this metro was going back and forth. The only thing that was built in 2002 was the convention center, which is right here, and nothing that you see here. None of this was built. So over the ensuing 10 years, they built a shopping complex, office towers, homes for lots of families, a high school, there's a library being built right here, and then our two projects that are right there. So all of that was built after the infrastructure of the movement. Now what's interesting is that this was financed, this metro, by the sale of the lands to private developers. And they were able to take a 30-year financing scheme with the sale of the land being higher than their expectations or calculations, and they wiped out 9 years of financing. So they were able to create a purely built, entirely financed metro within 21 years. And that's pretty impressive when you compare it to Seattle, where I used to live, which had the monorail extension, where they actually financed it or wanted to finance it over 50 years, 2.5 generations, to actually do something that might not even last that long, if you think of the Kingdom. So, you know, here are these sort of buildings along this metro, and here you have the parking. The parking requires ventilation, so we had to perforate these panels. And we didn't want to just create a standard perforation. We went to the actual company that perforated the metal. We asked how many different size holes. He came back and said, I can make 6 different holes. And so then we took a picture, an image of Mount Everest, and we punched in Mount Everest into the metal panels. So you live in the flattest country in Europe, and you can say, I live in Mount Everest. So that right there was kind of like an amazing thing that everyone in the city suddenly knew about this project and about living in the mountain. All these units that you see here, 80 different units, are all connected by these gang bridges and this sort of funicular, so basically a diagonal elevator going up. If we were used a standard elevator, it would require 7 up and down elevators. So no developer in their right mind would, you know, spend 7 elevators to connect 80 apartments. So we had to really sort of think about how can we do it, and then it was basically solved with just one funicular that moves up and down, plus it gives the residents a really, really nice sort of experience. The kids almost kind of consider it a Tivoli or like an amusement park ride. Everything sort of on the car side is very colorful, almost kind of mirroring the cars themselves, which are, you know, metallic and all sort of rainbow's colors. When you move inside your apartment, you really move into kind of a neutral, a warm environment, hardwood floors, and looking out into the nature. You're just sort of, with one finger, you can sort of slide open the doors and move out into that open space. So you almost have a way of sort of bringing the best parts of suburbia up into a more dense kind of project. And that's really another thing, is that, you know, not everything about suburbia, this house, for instance, is bad. It's quite nice that you can move from inside to outside. It's quite nice that you can have your kids run out of the kitchen door and you don't have to be worried about them because you have a sort of fenced-in area. So all of those qualities we want to be able to kind of keep and to maintain as we move up into the sort of the 11th stories. Now, we did these 2 projects for one client in Copenhagen, and he asked us to do a third, which is the 8 house down here. This is the entire area built out. It's going to actually house about 40,000 people when it's all built, and it would provide work for 25,000 people. So if you imagine that Copenhagen is only 550,000 people, almost an increase of 10% of people living and working here. That's downtown right over there. And again, it's all based on this kind of high-speed link. It's only about 12 minutes from this stop into the heart of the city. The 8 House finished construction in 2010. And here's just a short little video that kind of explains how we sort of work. You might see Todd in there somewhere. So we do a lot in an open kind of office where a lot of people can sort of cross-fertilize the projects. There's the model shop right in the middle where we go through the prototyping of the ideas. And what's interesting with these kinds of movies, this movie wasn't done after the fact as a marketing movie for the client and the project. This movie was done at the beginning of the project because we had to actually convince the city for variances. So we use this kind of media to actually explain the project and our intentions so that the people that are making the decisions, the policy, are actually able to understand what we're actually trying to achieve. So you have to sort of see this kind of as a little bit of an investment in the process of design. So Bjarke is going to basically explain what are the intentions of our project. This is Copenhagen with the canal going through the center, and the green space is this really huge open space that I pointed out earlier that's being protected by making the dense new part of town. And the new part of town is this little necktie that's extending to the south of the city, and the red are the metro lines. So we're at the end of one of the metro lines. Now, when the orange part is like our site, when the city first wanted to sell the site, it was actually 1 million square feet. And our client didn't have enough money for the million. So the first thing he had to do was to convince the city to break up the parcel into 2, and that he would purchase 600,000 square feet of that developable land. Now, if we just look at the 600,000 square feet, it was basically what the city asked us to do was build a huge perimeter block with this little thing at the top. And then we said things aren't architecture. If we build a slender tower and we put it into a little square or a piazza, that is architecture. And then we can talk about qualities of space. And we use kind of historical references, in this case San Marco and Venice, to kind of talk about what are the spaces that we're trying to achieve with this project. And then we're also looking at Copenhagen and saying, you know, Copenhagen is a city of towers, slender towers, and there really hasn't been that kind of slenderness or elegance for a long time in Copenhagen. So, you know, you're basically looking at how we can sort of talk about and making these kind of changes to the master plan. The city said okay to the little tower. We then said, yeah, but you know, if you're living, it's a residential tower. So if you're living at the top, you have a beautiful view. Sadly, if you live at the base of the tower, it's the same problem. You're looking into another building. So we proposed to make a twist at the base so that those folks also have a view, and thereby increasing the value of that project. So then we begin to talk about the constructability of the tower, and by building these models, we can soon figure out that it's not a concrete tower, but a steel tower because of the sort of the diagonal bracing that's required. So then we also talk with the contractor and have conversations with these models about the constructability of the project. So it also goes from, say, the marketing to the city scale and the master planning to the construction. That's what sort of these movies and these models give us the power to do. So here's an image of what we envisioned the project to be, and here's what it actually now looks like. So it's pretty close to what we imagined. It's basically 475 units of housing arranged in sort of different types of housing, 3 layers of housing, and then above retail and office space below. So it's really a sort of a layer cake of different programs. Another thing that's very nice is this is the southern edge of Copenhagen. So the city begins with this building, and everything to the south is this sort of open space that's there. So it's really also the chance to sort of live in the city, but have the nature very, very close by. Consider this. This is something that I think we should all be learning from. This is a retention pond, stormwater. So today, when it rains, we actually pump the water. We take it into sewers. It goes into a stormwater system. It's all underground. It's huge canal or canalizations. And every once in a while, a storm will come along that actually tests the durability of that system. Now, here, all of the hard surfaces wash out into this pond, and we use natural evaporation to actually bring the water back up into the system. So we don't pump the water anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. It just goes straight here. Now, the reason I say that we can learn a lot from this is that the units that look out onto the stormwater retention pond, they pay more because people pay more to look on water than dirt. So you actually, right now, take something like rainwater, you put it underground, and you spend a lot of money trying to get rid of it, when actually it has a value. And if you actually keep it and look at it, you actually increase the property value of the units or of the things that you have. So really sort of open water or storm water is when you have the space, is something that you should really, really consider with projects. And then enjoying the wildlife as well. So what I haven't even started to explain is that in this project, these 475 units, no parking spaces. The city, through this master plan, wants to kind of socially engineer people into giving up the car, a la Audi coming to us and complaining. They want people to take the metro or to bike. And so we saw that as actually a chance to actually design the bicycle into the project. So you can take your bicycle and bike up this open ramp all the way to your 10th level apartment, or bike all the way down. There are also 24 elevators in this building, and they're all dimensioned so that you can actually take a mountain bike into the elevator and go and ride up all the way to the 10th floor. So there's really an idea here that actually takes the street, the urbanness, the publicness, and takes it all the way through a large-scale multifamily project. We do that by working with the different widths of the program. So when you have retail or office, you need a certain width for that to actually work or function. Then you have a townhouse on top of the retail. It doesn't need the same width, so you're left with enough space for a garden and a ramp. Then we have flats with balconies on both sides, and then we have penthouses on top, again, that provides the space to actually allow for that garden and the path. So my friends here are going to be basically walking up a public path through the building. You can look into the different units. You have a door, you have a little garden in front that provides that sort of layer of sort of privacy. And you don't go up a single stair. You can just basically walk up the entire sort of 10 floors. And what it's done is that actually it's created sort of a social integration where the people are actually walking in the evenings, their kids or their dog, and they see their neighbors and they have a chat in the garden. You also see that it actually provides a lot of protection because certain families are watching out over their kids. And people from other parts of Copenhagen are actually coming here on the weekends because it's the best view in town because the country is so flat. So just the ability to sort of walk up and then enjoy a cup of coffee in this cafe at the end of it is actually something that people actually go out to do. We're not as blessed to have so many vantage points as in San Francisco. So here are the gardens that people can sort of tend to, the layers of program, and then the big courtyards that there are two of. We pushed up the housing on the north side so it can actually have a view out. And then there's a cross in the center of the 8 that connects the two halves. So I've shown you sort of 3 projects, housing projects, residential projects, that sort of show you how we sort of think. Now I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about how we actually integrate the public into the participation of how we design. This is our latest project that just finished in Copenhagen called Superkilen. Superkilen was at one time train tracks that went through Copenhagen with sort of passenger trains. That they left, And you can, I mean, huge stripes of Los Angeles were just sort of leftover right-of-ways where the trains used to go, the red line, the blue line, down to Santa Monica and so forth. So lots of cities have these kinds of right-of-ways, but don't know what to do with them. In the case of Copenhagen, it was actually the most dangerous place to be. It's where a lot of gangs would kind of do their sort of fighting, West Side Story style, and you had like a lot of nationalities. There were like over 60 different nationalities living right here in this neighborhood, and it was really, really a difficult place. So the city basically provided a competition to deal with 1 kilometer of this stretch and to sort of basically to try to upgrade the public space. And we went in with Topotech, which is a landscape office in Berlin, and with Superflex, which are artists in Denmark. And the three of us formed kind of a curatorial committee that didn't think about designing space, but actually filtering the public to actually design the space themselves. So we basically won the competition by calling this 1 kilometer, we call it a red square, a black market, and a green park. We then wrote this concept into the newspaper, and we said there are so many nationalities here. Instead of filling all of this space with Danish design, like Danish bench, Danish telephone booth, and trying to get 60 nationalities to live a Danish lifestyle, it's much more interesting if those citizens could actually suggest urban furniture, fountains, swings, and actually bring those to the conversation. So we put out in lots of different media, on the radio, in magazines, in the newspaper, sort of a real call for urban furniture. And we got over 1,000 actual suggestions, which we then filtered into 108 elements. And everything from sort of a drain sewage cap to a sign from the Red Square were actually now kind of spread out through this 1 kilometer. So this is the Red Square during construction, and kind of now finished, and what it looks like. This is the black market, and with the locals, and the green park, which also has sort of a green bike path running through it. So these are some of the parts that were suggested. This one didn't make the cut. The city's insurance agent didn't allow for it, but it's a swing from Estonia. We really fought for it for a very, very long time. These are swings that actually are in the project from Baghdad, from Iraq. This was a slide that actually was in Chernobyl, and someone from Chernobyl was suggesting this. We actually would go to the country and try to source the material, ask either for the original or then had a replica. In this case, the Geiger counter was so high for radioactivity that we actually got this rebuilt, remade. We got a real sign from the Red Square. These are bollards from Ghana that are now in Copenhagen. And this is really nice. You can almost do kind of an analysis of society by just looking at the benches. This is a bench from Spain, and also it exists in Mexico, basically a love seat. You're looking into the eyes of your loved one. This is a bench from Belgium, where apparently no one cares about each other. And it pretty much is like the EU Parliament, right? Sort of everybody gets a seat, but who knows what's ever going to come of it. If you're from Brazil, you've probably seen these telephone poles. This is a Japanese gentleman who used to slide on this octopus when he was a kid, and we had the actual Japanese craftsmen come and build it in Copenhagen. From the U.S., we got a donut sign from Los Angeles that's now in Copenhagen. So a dentist sign from Qatar, and these are the people that actually made these suggestions for these things. We also had artists, Shepard Ferry, that came over and did did kind of installations. Here's the fellow from Japan. And then just this summer in June, we basically opened it to the general public. So it's, again, as architects, no buildings, just open space, and actually becoming a filter for the actual public so that you actually can listen and integrate and create design through listening. So a lot of these ideas are actually built into our project that we built for the Danish Expo, or the Shanghai Expo, the Danish Pavilion, where we're trying to sort of, the ideas were better city, better life. So you had over 200 pavilions, all trying to show the future, or what could be the future. And what we wanted to do, and what we were very, very careful to do, was to not just show pretty pictures of pretty people doing pretty things, which is most often these sort of pavilions of propaganda. We really wanted to focus on just a few things, 4 or 5 things, and actually allow for the people coming to the pavilion to actually experience them just as they would in Copenhagen. So we actually had bike paths just like they are in Copenhagen, and you were able to sort of take a bike that you can take as a tourist in Copenhagen and ride around the exhibit. It was the only pavilion where you were actually allowed to kind of, for anyone with a short attention span, you could literally go through the entire pavilion in about 2 minutes. And you know, it was basically this kind of ability to try out a bicycle, or in the case of the Copenhagen has water that's clean enough to swim in the Grand Canal, or the main canal. And one of our first projects was this bathing platform that basically, before there was just concrete mixing plants and soybean mixing or warehouses, the entire waterfront was just one strip of industry, and was dumping all of the dirty water and all into the canal, and no one wanted to live along it. By the mere fact of spending about 10 years to clean the water and then to create and celebrate that with this swimming platform, suddenly the real estate value of all of these buildings rose by 50%. So it was always there, they were always close to the water, but they actually weren't able to use the water. So by the mere idea of actually suddenly creating an amenity and celebrating it, the city has changed. And that change has all occurred within the last kind of decade. So this is what we call the Copenhagen now, right here in Copenhagen. And a lot of meat, a lot of skin, I guess, to see. And we wanted to basically celebrate that by actually bringing the Copenhagen water to Shanghai, and to say, guess what? You too can actually have water that's clean enough to swim in if you wanted. So we brought the Little Mermaid, as some of you might know, and we celebrated on the first day, or the opening, by actually Bjarke diving straight in and showing the folks how clean it was. Celebrating it in many ways. So the other thing is that we wanted to talk about authenticity, that it wasn't kind of a replica that we're sending of the Little Mermaid. We wanted to actually send the real Little Mermaid. And sure enough, Bjarke went all the way to Parliament, and we have kind of a party in Denmark that's kind of like the Tea Party here. So they were like, you're letting go of the soul of the country, and no way. So basically, Bjarke was up against the Tea Party guy to sort of talk about, well, what if we actually give up the Little Mermaid and send her over for 6 months? So that was pretty impressive to see how the country kind of really came around and celebrated. This is the customs official in China, making sure that we weren't hiding any beer bottles or anything in there. And then we were just as serious when we took her back out that we weren't going to get a replica in return. But it was the idea that it would be so easy to send a replica, but what is that actually saying? If we're so upset by the piracy of software or of movies, or if we're saying don't copy our intellectual property? What is it if we just send a copy of The Little Mermaid? So by sending the real thing, there's this discussion that occurred about authenticity and about the real thing and seeing the real versus a copy. So it actually performed as we had hoped. Then we asked, because what happens when she's not there in Copenhagen? So we invited the artist Ai Weiwei to basically take a look, and he brought this CCTV camera that's similar to the camera that's outside of his studio. So he basically is bringing this camera and was beaming a real-time image of the Little Mermaid where she would normally sit in Copenhagen. And what's interesting about that is that it was a real-time feed that was uncensored. So he was actually thrilled by the idea that he could actually beam something halfway around the world and for it to be like a speaking corner of people coming and speaking to each other, or at least hand gestures and making signs and such. So in many ways it was a chance for us to sort of really talk about this idea of authenticity. We're doing a project that's just starting construction in Shenzhen, which is this double high-rise, a 200-meter and a 100-meter tall, for the Shenzhen Energy Mansion. Here, the Shenzhen Energy Company was actually trying to be a good kind of neighbor and demonstrate how to reduce energy consumption in a high-rise. So in a normal high-rise, you have direct sunlight coming in and you have the view out. What we were going to do was to sort of create kind of a ribbed, almost like a Issei Miyake dress, where the sunlight is actually thwarted from coming in and the views are still left into the northerly direction. So you're now inside the office space looking out one way and blocking the direct sunlight in the other way. That reduces basically the heat inside the building by 30%, purely by the manipulation of the outside facade. So we do make sort of little ripples into the facade so that we have floors where all of the workers from the Energy Mansion can come and enjoy a more expansive view on certain floors. And then you also have the entries down at the base that allow you to sort of enter into the building. So this, again, is just starting construction. It's 100,000 square meters and looks to be completed by 2016. This is closer to home. This is Vancouver, and we have a project with Westbank that we started about a year and a half ago, and it's literally, this is Granville Bridge. For those who know, the Granville Island is right here, and it's a site that's pretty much at a disadvantage. You have a site that's basically pieces of pie that are just separated by all of this kind of bridge infrastructure. And when we looked at the site, the first thing we had to do was to sort of say, well, what can we actually build on it? And so you have the setback of the sidewalk. You have a setback from the road. This is the on-ramp onto the bridge. That one has a 30-meter setback for sight lines so that the cars can actually see oncoming traffic and being able to sort of move in. So then you have another setback back here from a park where you can't actually cast a shadow on this park. So this is the entire site, and this is what you can actually develop into the heights. So it was really hard to sort of imagine how you could actually make this profitable. Most folks would actually extrude that triangle all the way up to the allowable height and leave it and say, this is not developable. But that was the challenge that we took, and Westbank gave us the chance to sort of test different ideas. And we said, well, you know, this 30-meter setback makes a lot of sense at the street level where you need to provide the views. But at the top, what if you actually were to create a floor plate that makes and maximizes the actual units, residential units, and then you actually were to tie it back into the triangle at the lower levels? Then you would actually be able to increase the amount of square meters by 50%. and you would be increasing the most expensive units, which are the highest units that have the most view. So you would be actually increasing the value of that property as you develop. Now the city wants to have like a gateway as you move into the city. So these towers are actually allowed to be built higher than the rest. And what we really want to do is to create kind of a tower that looks almost like a drape or a curtain that welcomes you into the city and sort of allows you to sort of come in. So we have just completed SD, schematic design, on this, and are now also developing the parcels down on the street level. We just got the approval from the city to actually take it up to 500 feet, which also was a variance that we were able to coordinate with the city, and it's basically moving ahead. It has basically, there of course are some extra costs in both the cantilevering and the sort of tying back of the structure, but it is something that's actually doable. So here's just some of the silhouettes that you get. And some more images of both the street level things that are occurring down at the ramps and the tower and how it sits in the city. So a lot of it has been a lot of meetings with the city and with the design committee of the city to actually allow for this project to move ahead. Down at the streetscape, we want to actually utilize the on-ramps and the spaces in between the buildings, similar to like the High Line in New York, where you're now beginning to see programs for underneath the High Line. We kind of see this as a chance to actually create spaces that you can have lots of different, from street parties, beer gardens to movie nights, that you can actually activate that space. It's not a negative of actually being underneath that space. So, you know, one thing that's always interesting to look at in terms of technology is that, you know, this is the Flatiron building, which really took a space in New York where Broadway was hitting the grid, and is in many ways a disadvantaged site and doesn't allow for a very sort of efficient floor plate. But due to steel construction and the elevator, you literally were able to suddenly create value out of a site that wouldn't have it if it was just a few levels high. And so we want to sort of take a look at how through technology, in this case, being able to sort of cantilever out and go from the flat iron to the fat iron, to sort of be able to sort of look again at how you can, with technological advancements, create that value in certain sites. To close off, just a couple projects in the US. This is in Park City, Utah. We took part in a competition with a couple of actual Californian architects for the Kimball Art Museum. Now, Park City is a city that is a silver mining town, like many of the towns in Colorado and in Utah, and really were established for the mere fact of actually taking silver out. This is the Coalition building, where you basically had this infrastructure of cables and sort of bringing the silver that was being mined into the city. So you had this very large structure in this sort of log cabin kind of city. And the Coalition building was, until it burned down in 1985, really not only the tallest structure, but also the structure that provided an identity to Park City. And when you look at this valley and you look at sort of the plumes of smoke coming out of the sawmills, and you now consider that the plumes of smoke are now like snow cannons making snow, that the entire sort of infrastructure that had been there for mining has been, within 100 years, has been just sort of moved into an entirely different one of sort of tourism and resort. Also, to think that the first cable car, or the first kind of ski lift, was actually taking the old mining infrastructure and just hanging a seat on it instead of a bucket, and that was what allowed people to actually move up a mountain and ski down it. So actual ski lift technology was actually born out of Colorado and Utah. It's known for the Sundance Film Festival and several arts festivals. The Kimball Arts Center basically also repossessed this mechanics building in the center of town, and that's what the actual space is for art. It's just a repossessed kind of mechanic space. It's also the headquarters of the Sundance Film Festival every year. So you kind of get to it through, this is the normal grid of the city that you've seen now a couple of pictures of, and then there's this sort of main road that sort of also provides the main access into town on Heber. So you have basically the existing facility, and they wanted to create basically an addition of gallery space and administrative space. So we decided to create 2 gallery spaces, one at the base that just extends the original building, and then hovering one above, and then placing the administration in between. So the existing building would then basically fill out the block to Main Street. The new gallery at the top would actually orientate itself into Heber, which is the main sort of drive into town, and then you would basically connect that orientation with the one below it. Now the only thing here is that we actually wanted to look at the actual tectonics of construction, so we wanted to make that twist within the log cabin kind of construction. And we wanted to dimension our addition, the tower, to the same height and the same proportions of the original coalition building. So that just as you would have this kind of wooden construction with stacked logs throughout the Midwest, and especially in Utah, you had some really beautiful kind of wood constructions. Even within the hogans of the Native Americans, you have wood timbers that are rotating, moving up to actually provide the substructure. Finally, the actual railroad that went across the salt flats of Utah was built on the initial sort of old growth that they were able to log down. And they would pile these logs into the salt flats and then build the train tracks on top. The train tracks are no longer used, so you now have literally all of these piles, like toothpicks, being picked up and taken out of the salt, and they've been basically manicured by salt over 100 years. And that's the wood that we're going to basically reclaim and use for the Kimball Art Museum. So we're using log cabin technique. We're also using the width of the log to actually move and create the twist moving up. So if we look at the base here, there's the extension of the original museum, and then we move up into the gallery space and into, it's actually a bit like the De Young Museum, I think, the tower at the top. So what's interesting in these old mills is that the wood is actually not necessarily the structure of the sawmills. The steel was the structure of the sawmill, and the wood was just sort of outside providing weather cladding. So we viewed our museum as well constructively as that the wood is not a structural element, it's literally just the facade cladding, and that we actually have a steel structure inside that is actually taking the weight of the project, or of the, and between the steel structure of the galleries and the wood cladding, we have the movement moving through the building as a kind of a radius around the edge. This is the cafe that opens up into the roof of the adjoining of the old space. And then we have the office space, and on top the gallery that you can see. So this is going through fundraising at the moment, and we're hoping that that will take about a year, year and a half, and we can get started on this in the next year. In closing, another sort of cultural project. This is in Norway. It's an industrialist who basically has taken over another mill and has a huge sculpture collection that is spread out over all of this property. So you have the old mill that goes across the river here. You have tons of little sculptures on either side of these banks. And people have to wander all around this land and come back to the mill. So at the moment, the mill is the center, and it's kind of like spreads out, and people kind of wander aimlessly around the site. He wanted to make an addition to this existing mill for a new gallery space for sculpture that was not able to be out in the elements. We suggested to him that there shouldn't be an addition to the existing, because the existing building is actually quite nice, and just adding to it would actually take away from the character of it. So we asked if he would consider actually looking at the gallery as a bridge that would actually provide the ability to sort of go and wander around all of these sculptures, go across the bridge, and then bring them back so that you create a loop. So basically the building also creates a master plan and then the building in itself is thought of just as a means of getting across, but at the same time it is 3 levels on one side, and it's a huge open space, single space on the other, so that you then have light coming in from the side here and from the top here. You have also a black box, and then the movement through the galleries. So this is the window, the fenestration, as it would move across the building. And you would have a chance to sort of really create a lot of different, diverse kind of qualities of space for your collection moving through the project. So this is the main gallery that's 3 levels high. And then we're moving into the sort of the black box. And this is the stairwell that goes from the big space into these 3 different levels. So this is a competition that's currently still in the process of being decided. That's the old building that we were asked to actually add to. And we're hoping for a good outcome. And in Norway, you always have to have a snow picture. So let me see if... a rain picture, of course, and a snow picture. So, and then to close, this is actually the reason that we're in New York and why I'm now living in New York. This is the West 57th project. It's on West 57th and the Hudson, which is now in Hurricane Sandy, I guess. It's underwater. The site is right adjacent to the Central Park. And it's where also the Hudson River Park kind of ends. And the idea was to actually think of if Central Park could be considered like a courtyard to the city, this is a courtyard to a building. And we were imagining if you have basically, I don't know if I'm making that. I don't know. So I think someone's telling me I got to finish up. So this is a skyscraper, which is basically the typology of New York for the past 60 years. This is the courtyard, which we love in Copenhagen and throughout most of Europe. So if you actually marry a skyscraper with a courtyard, you get a court scraper. So you basically take the courtyard that is usually on the street level and you raise it so that you have a full podium at the base. For retail, we needed to protect these views from this building because this was also built by the same client, and he had just sold all of these units for enormous amounts of money, and building a tower here would make a lot of folks angry. So we then pull up one corner of the courtyard to create the tower. The sun gets into the courtyard and the south-facing apartments. We still preserve pretty much 80% of the views of this building, and we can get into all of the units through these 2 elevator cores. So it's basically creating basically a new typology. It also takes the sort of the scale of the water's edge into the scale of the city beyond. and it creates a lot of different silhouettes from wherever you're seeing it. It almost looks like a pyramid from certain parts of the city. Again, the podium is providing street life along the entire edge, and it takes the sort of the Hudson River Park and brings it kind of into the actual building site, into the block through the courtyard. So, and then these are the views as you go out of your apartment looking across the courtyard to New Jersey. And this is the site now, so it's under construction as of a couple months ago, and will be completed in 2015. So here's a little movie.
Yeah, I'm out at Brooklyn, now I'm down in Tribeca, right next to De Niro, but I'll be hood forever, I'm the new Sinatra, and since I made it here, I can make it anywhere, yeah, they love me everywhere, I used to cop in Harlem, all of my Dominicanos right there up on Broadway, brought me back to that McDonald's, took it to my stash spot, 560 State Street, catch me in the kitchen like a Simmons whipping pastry, Statue of Liberty, long live the World Trade, long live the King, yo, I'm from the Empire State.
Thank you very much. Anybody got a question? Now's your chance.
Let me ask you, maybe I'll sort of open this up. Given the first image that you showed at the beginning in terms of systems, how does that play into a number of the projects, or does that become a larger conceptual approach to how you're thinking about them individually? But
yeah, I mean, we actually, when we worked together like everyone does with engineers, landscape architects, specialists, facade specialists, and what we actually tried to do is to sort of have a really open-ended conversation, and we present the ideas of how we envision utilizing or maximizing the use of energy. We also challenge most often the mechanical engineer by thinking of actually engineering without engines. So if a Louisiana plantation home was able to create an environment that was hospitable in a southern climate before there was air conditioning, then there probably is an ability to actually create habitable places in tropical climates without engines, or in this case, without kind of ductwork and all of the things that we basically are bound by. So we try to, with projects, you know, the first decision that you make in the siting of a project already has enormous impact on the energy use that building will have over the life of it. Realizing that facades and mechanical systems actually probably have a 20 to 30 year lifespan, and that you have to actually think about, if you're thinking about a long-term building, how do you replace the skin, just like our skin replaces itself. How do you replace that skin and work with the different functions of the building? And those, you know, we tend to not be bound by a certain program, but really try to design spaces that can function in a multiple ways. Yes?
Talk about the different methods in terms of different roles, I guess you could call it. Is asked to be a lobbyist or be an advocate for
sustainability and things like that. Was that an initiation of BIG to head out as designers, not only designers, but attack it from multiple fields, and from the political side, from the social side, things like that? Or is that a role that you've fallen into now?
I think that I would say that we don't shy away from any kind of a conversation, and we do actually look for ways of discussing architecture to the general public. Now that could be something as simple as a TED Talk, or something like going after certain types of journalists or journalism to get a certain group of people interested in something that normally would not be, and engaging them. So something like 10 Downing Street, it's not like you banging on the door and being let in. It's an invitation. But that invitation, I would say, came about through a long process of really engaging and being very proactive about broadening the conversation of what architecture is.
Yeah, I really love the kind of playful and intuitive form finding that a lot of your projects kind of exhibit. And I'm just wondering, kind of simply and broadly, how do you, maybe what's some kind of technique, or kind of what's your philosophy maybe on defending these really simple and kind of playful formal maneuvers that can sometimes, you know, when looked at kind of critically, get a lot of, you know, bad rep because they are so simple and because they are so kind of formal when you present them in a way that's really convincing, but when, you know, when you start to look closer at them, maybe lots of people start to kind of garner a lot of criticism of the, you know, kind of basic maneuvers. And I like it, but for me, I find it really hard to kind of argue those kind of formal maneuvers, and I'm just curious if you have any insight for me.
I think if you actually do architectural history, and you were to actually analyze throughout history the kind of successful projects for various reasons, if it's circulation or if it's kind of light and how light moves through that space, they're very simplistic moves. The Pantheon is a very simplistic space, yet it creates an enormous kind of emotional experience. So I think it's not about being simplistic. I think it's just about creating good proportions, and it's about creating good spaces. It's about you know, also empowering certain sites with what those sites can actually provide because of the challenges that a certain site might have. So you're sort of unleashing that site's potential. So I think that if you're just looking at, you know, boxes and twists and turns, it may become very simplistic. But if you actually see what those twists and turns and sort of maneuvers actually create spatially by visiting the projects, you won't find them to be that simplistic. So I would really encourage you to go to Copenhagen and to see some of the projects.
We took a group this year. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of innovations in your architecture, both formal and programmatic and otherwise. And you know, that seems like it would be something which would be great if you have the right person to work with. I'm curious if you come across situations where you don't, or if you at times have difficulty getting your ideas across to your clients and to other parties involved.
Well, I think I mentioned with the one project, it's really about listening, because everybody that is a part of the process of where, you know, the architect is one cog in the wheel of actually creating a project. So the person that actually is the most powerful is the fire marshal. So without the fire marshal giving his final okay, or her final okay, there is no project. So you have to create something that actually is influenced and is able to sort of satisfy all of the constituents. And what we, like the idea of yes is more, is actually that you don't view the process of pleasing as a sort of negative one, but the actual act of pleasing the client, pleasing the policy or the city, pleasing the investors and pleasing the users is actually seen as something that provides something that's better at the end than any one of those constituents could have done on their own. So what your role is to sort of take out the best parts of the process and allow for the building or the project to sort of demonstrate those things. And it's understanding what perspective does the fire marshal come if they say no, that's not possible, and then approaching it creatively and saying I can actually do something that satisfies those constraints and brings value to others in the process.
Any other questions? All right, then. Well, thank you very much.